Okay, so ready to dive into a really fascinating figure today. Andrew Yang, entrepreneur philanthropist, former presidential candidate,
Mm.
and, well, opinions on him are kind of all over the place.
Yeah, you see him called a visionary by some and a complete opportunist by others.
It's true. Some people think he's trying to genuinely change the world, and others think it's all an act. So grifter or gifted, that's what we're
Uh-huh.
trying to figure out. And wow, you sent us a ton of sources for this one article's book, excerpts, podcast interviews. It seems like you're as fascinated by this guy as we are.
Absolutely. And I think this deep dive is really well timed given his recent moves.
Totally. So let's map this out a little. We've got his early life and career, which is definitely not the traditional path to success. Then his nonprofit Venture for America. Some see it as altruistic, some see it as a stepping stone. Then the 2020 presidential run, where he really starts pushing this idea of UBI and gains a massive following the Yang Gang.
Right. And now he's gone and left the Democratic Party to start his own, the Forward Party. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, it's like he's engineered his life to be this puzzle, right? Deliberately blurring the lines between genuine conviction and calculated ambition.
It really makes you wonder, what is the real Andrew Yang?
Right. Okay, so let's rewind back to the beginning. On paper, his early life seems pretty standard. Ivy League,
Yeah.
always. A son of Taiwanese immigrants, goes to Phillips Exeter Academy, graduates from Brown University, then on to Columbia Law School.
Yeah.
Even lands a corporate law job.
Seems like he's on the fast track to CEO land, right?
Totally. But then he does something really unexpected. He quits law after only 5 months. Calls those months the worst of his life. Who does that?
Seriously, it's like he's allergic to the ordinary.
It does make you wonder, right? What was going on there? Maybe he just really hated law. Or maybe it was something more, a rejection of the whole corporate world.
Maybe. So then what? He jumps headfirst into the startup scene?
Right.
Yep.
Tries his hand at all sorts of things, even a celebrity-affiliated fundraising platform.
Not your typical lawyer move.
Definitely not. But you can see those entrepreneurial instincts kicking in. And eventually this leads him to found Venture for America, or VFA, in 2011.
And that's where we start to see some of his big ideas about job creation and the future of work starting to take shape, right?
Exactly. VFA focused on placing recent grads and startups specifically in cities with emerging economies. On the surface, it seems pretty altruistic.
Right. Helping to revitalize struggling cities, create jobs, foster innovation. But some critics see it differently.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's almost too perfect. Like he's setting the stage for his own personal brand.
Right, like a testing ground for his political ambitions. It definitely raised his profile and gave him a platform to start talking about the things that would define his later career. Automation,
Hmm.
the future of work, all that. He even writes a book around this time called Smart People Should Build Things.
It's hard to ignore that timing.
Yeah,
So is he genuinely passionate about these issues, or is it all just part of some master plan?
it's tough to say.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible he was truly trying to make a difference with VFA, but it's also possible that he saw it as a way to gain experience, build a network, and ultimately propel himself into the political arena.
It's like he was laying the foundation for something much bigger.
Right. And Venture for America definitely sets the stage for his next big move, the 2020 presidential run. And that's when things get really interesting.
Oh, yeah. That's when Andrew Yang goes from being a relative unknown in the startup world to a national phenomenon. And it all hinges on one very radical idea: universal basic income, or UBI.
Okay, so let's break down UBI, because this is really central to understanding Yang.
Yeah, because it's a bold idea, to say the least.
He's proposing giving every American adult $1,000 a month, no strings attached,
Yeah.
so essentially free money.
And he frames this as a solution to a very specific problem: automation. He's arguing that robots and AI are going to displace millions of jobs, and we need to prepare for a future where work as we know it is no longer the primary source of income.
It's a pretty dystopian view of the future when you think about it.
Yeah.
But he's not just pulling this out of thin air. He cites studies that predict massive job losses due to automation. Talks about truck drivers being replaced by self-driving vehicles, factory workers being replaced by robots. And he makes the case that traditional welfare programs just aren't equipped to handle this kind of disruption.
So he sees UBI as a more efficient and dignified way to provide a safety net in a world where work is becoming increasingly unstable.
Right. And he really hammers home this idea that the market doesn't care about people's well-being. I remember this line from his book, The War on Normal People, that really stuck with me. He says, "The market is not your mother. The market does not care if you live or die."
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty stark.
He's basically arguing that the free market left to its own devices will leave a lot of people behind. And that's a scary thought for a lot of people. especially in a country where your worth is so often tied to your job.
Absolutely. So Yang's message really resonates with people. It taps into a deep anxiety about the future, a fear of being left behind in a rapidly changing world.
Right. And it's this message that fuels the rise of the Yang Gang.
Hmm.
This army of enthusiastic supporters, mostly young people, drawn to his data-driven approach, his unconventional thinking, and let's be honest, his charisma.
He's a very charismatic guy. It's hard to deny that.
They see him as a breath of fresh air in a political landscape that feels dominated by old ideas and partisan gridlock. And it's his energy, this grassroots enthusiasm that propels him from being a total long shot to a serious contender in the Democratic primary.
It's incredible when you think about it. Like, he created a movement, almost a cult of personality.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Which again makes you wonder, is this genuine grassroots energy drawn to a visionary leader, or is this something more manufactured, more about Yang himself than the ideas he's promoting?
Right. Is he a brilliant marketer or a true believer?
It's the question that keeps coming up, and it's one we're going to keep circling back to as we go deeper. But before we jump ahead, I think it's important to acknowledge that Yang's 2020 campaign wasn't just about UBI. He had a whole range of policy ideas, many of them pretty unconventional.
Oh, yeah. He was full of ideas. Some of them pretty out there, like his proposal to create a Department of the Attention Economy to address the negative impacts of social media and technology on our mental health.
And remember his idea to give every high schooler a democracy dollar, to donate to political campaigns as a way to combat corruption and increase civic engagement.
That was a wild one. I mean, whether you agree with his specific proposals or not, you can't deny that he brought a fresh perspective to the table.
Totally. He wasn't afraid to tackle tough issues and to propose solutions that challenged conventional wisdom. And that, I think, is part of what made him so appealing to voters who were hungry for something different.
He definitely tapped into a sense of dissatisfaction with the status quo. But did he offer realistic solutions, or was it all just clever marketing? A way to stand out in a crowded field?
That's the debate, isn't it? And it's what makes this whole deep dive so intriguing.
Trying to figure out if Andrew Yang is the real deal, a genuine visionary, or if it's all a carefully constructed act.
And to do that, we need to move beyond the 2020 campaign and look at what he does next. Because what he does after he drops out of the race is, in some ways, even more revealing.
That's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
So we left off with Andrew Yang suspending his presidential campaign.
February 2020.
But he doesn't just disappear, right?
No, he definitely doesn't. He becomes a CNN political commentator for a little bit, writes more books, and continues to advocate for UBI.
And this is when he founds Humanity Forward.
Right, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing his vision of a more human-centered economy and society.
And he's putting his money where his mouth is with this one, too.
Oh, yeah. He personally funds a UBI pilot program, giving $1,000 a month to 20 low-income families in the Bronx for a year.
A whole year. And he also launches the Mayors for a Guaranteed Income Coalition,
encouraging cities across the country to experiment with UBI programs.
He's really trying to make this happen. It makes you wonder if his critics, who often say he's all talk and no action, are missing something. Yeah, I mean, it's a bold move for sure, but it also raises questions about, scalability, sustainability. Can UBI actually work on a national level? Where would the funding even come from?
Right. These are all questions that Yang and his supporters need to answer if they want to convince the skeptics.
Absolutely. And speaking of skeptics, there are plenty of criticisms leveled against Yang during this period.
Yeah, a lot of people point to his lack of political experience. They say he's naive about the complexities of government, and his solutions are overly simplistic.
And they point to his focus on technology as a cure-all, arguing that he overestimates its ability to solve deep-seated social and economic problems.
Right, and then there's foreign policy. A big question mark for a lot of people. Can he handle the complexities of international relations?
It's a valid concern. But Yang's supporters counter that his outsider status is actually a strength.
It's the classic insider versus outsider debate.
Right. They say he's not beholden to special interests, and he's more willing to challenge the status quo than someone who's spent their whole life in Washington.
They point to his business background as proof that he can get things done and that he's not afraid to take risks.
They also talk about his intelligence, charisma, and his ability to connect with people from all walks of life.
I mean, he does come across as very genuine.
Yeah, he does. So ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide whether they believe his lack of experience is a disqualifying factor or a sign that he's the kind of disruptor that Washington needs.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got Yang promoting UBI, launching initiatives, facing criticism. But then in 2021, he makes a move that really throws everyone for a loop. He leaves the Democratic Party.
Big move. What was his reasoning there?
Frustration with the two-party system. He basically says it's broken, paralyzed by partisanship, and incapable of solving the country's most pressing problems.
He actually compares the two major parties to a big company that's out of touch with its customers.
Ouch. Harsh, but kind of true.
Yeah, I can see where he's coming from.
He says both parties are more interested in scoring political points than actually governing.
Right. And they're so entrenched in their ideologies that they can't even find common ground.
And his solution. He launches the Forward Party, aiming to create a viable third party that can break the stranglehold of the two-party system and offer a genuine alternative to voters who feel disenfranchised by the status quo.
Wow, ambitious.
Definitely. The Forward Party's platform is centered around three main pillars.
Lay it on me.
Giving Americans more choices in elections, making it easier to vote and run for office, and promoting policies that address the challenges of the 21st century.
So ranked choice voting, open primaries, independent redistricting commissions, all that good stuff.
Exactly. They want to make elections fairer and more representative of the will of the people.
It's a tall order. Third parties have historically struggled to gain traction in American politics.
That's true. But Yang and his supporters believe that the time is ripe for a new political movement, one that transcends the old partisan divides and focuses on finding practical solutions to the challenges facing the country.
It's definitely a gamble. Is this a calculated move by Yang to maintain his own political relevance, or is it a genuine attempt to build a new kind of politics?
Again, it's hard to say for sure, but one thing's for clear.
What's that?
Yang's decision to leave the Democratic Party and launch the Forward Party has sent shockwaves through the political establishment, and it's raised his profile even higher, making him one of the most talked about figures in American politics today.
He's really good at positioning himself as this outsider, this disruptor, but it makes you wonder about his true intentions. Is he really trying to reform the system, or is he just playing the game better than anyone else?
And this brings us back to that central question, grifter or gifted? Is he driven by a genuine desire to serve, or is it all about self-promotion and ambition?
I think it's important to remember that those aren't mutually exclusive.
True, someone can be ambitious and idealistic at the same time.
Right, they can be driven by a desire for power and a genuine belief that they can make a positive impact.
So maybe the question isn't so much, is he one or the other, but rather to what extent each of these motivations drive his actions.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
Right, and to really understand the man behind the ideas, we need to look at his stances on a wider range of issues. Because UBI is just one piece of the puzzle.
Totally. We need to know where he stands on everything from education and healthcare to climate change and foreign policy. And that's where we'll pick up in part 3 of our deep dive.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our Andrew Yang deep dive.
We've covered a lot of ground with this guy, from his unusual career path to his bold ideas about the future to his pretty dramatic exit from the Democratic Party.
Yeah, he's definitely not afraid to shake things up. So now as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the big question is, what's his legacy? What impact has Andrew Yang had on American politics? And what does his rise tell us about the state of our democracy?
It's interesting, right? Because even though he's never actually held elected office, Yang has undeniably left his mark.
Okay, so let's start with the most obvious impact. He brought universal basic income UBI into the mainstream. Before his 2020 run, most Americans had probably never even heard of the concept.
Yeah, it was this fringe idea mostly discussed in academic circles, but Yang made it a central part of his campaign. And in doing so, he forced people to think differently about how we support people in a rapidly changing world.
He argued that robots and AI weren't just going to displace blue-collar jobs, they were coming for white-collar jobs too. Accountants, lawyers, even doctors. No one was immune.
Right. And he warned that if we didn't prepare for this disruption, we were headed for a massive economic crisis.
And his solution, UBI, was radical, giving every adult a guaranteed income regardless of whether they worked or not. It challenged our deeply held beliefs about work and the role of government.
It really did. But it also captured people's imaginations. It tapped into this growing sense of anxiety about the future.
That fear of being left behind in a world that seems to be changing faster than ever before.
And it sparked a national conversation. Even those who disagreed with Yang's proposal had to engage with this issue of automation and its impact on society.
Yeah, so I think it's safe to say that one of Yang's biggest legacies is that he made UBI a legitimate topic of political debate.
Yeah.
You can agree or disagree with the policy itself, but you can't deny that he shifted the conversation.
Totally. And I think his second major legacy is that he demonstrated the viability of a new kind of politics, one that's driven by ideas and data rather than ideology and partisanship.
He showed that it was possible to run a successful campaign without the traditional party machinery or big donors.
He built a movement from the ground up, fueled by grassroots enthusiasm and social media.
And he did it by appealing to people's desire for something different. He offered a vision of a future where technology could be used to solve problems, where government could be more efficient and responsive, and where people could come together across political divides.
And he wasn't afraid to challenge both Democrats and Republicans. He didn't shy away from solutions that were outside the mainstream.
Right. He may not have won the presidency, but he proved that there's a real appetite for a different kind of politics, one that's more focused on solutions than on scoring points.
Absolutely. So then there's his third legacy, his decision to leave the Democratic Party and launch the Forward Party. That was a bold move. It's still too early to tell what the long-term impact will be.
Definitely. But it definitely sent a message. It was a clear rejection of the status quo, a declaration that the two-party system is no longer serving the needs of the American people.
It's a bet on a future.
It really is. He's gambling that there's enough dissatisfaction with the current system to create a viable third party, one that can break the gridlock in Washington and offer a real alternative to voters who feel left behind.
Whether he succeeds or not, his efforts will likely have a lasting impact. He's inspired a new generation of activists and entrepreneurs and shown that it's possible to challenge the system.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think we're left with more questions than answers. Is he a grifter or a gifted visionary? Is he a force for good or a self-serving opportunist?
The truth is probably somewhere in between.
Probably. But one thing's for sure. He's a fascinating figure who's shaken up American politics in a way that few others have. And his story's not over yet. Who knows what he'll do next?
The only thing we can say with any certainty is that he'll continue to challenge our assumptions, provoke debate, and push the boundaries of what's possible in politics.
And that's something worth paying attention to no matter where you fall on the political spectrum.
Keep asking those tough questions. Grifter or gifted? Visionary or con artist? The answers are rarely simple, but the journey is always worthwhile.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yes.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the enigma that is Andrew Yang. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.